Hi, I'd like to talk for a few minutes about sacred fire. Sacred fire is probably one of the most core animistic practices, and in almost any tradition that I've ever encountered, there's some form of fire ceremony. In many of these traditions, the fire is actually thought of as an ancient ancestor. Um, it's thought of as one of the first beings to ever be created in many creation stories. So when I or anyone else work with fire in a sacred way, we're really sort of jumping past or jumping over human ancestors, animal ancestors, plant ancestors, and going very, very close to the beginnings of creation. And so the fire can be worked with in many ways, but since we're in the summer season now in the Northern Hemisphere, which has a sort of connection to fire in some cosmologies, I'd like to talk about just some basic things about working with fire in a sacred way. The first idea is that in a sacred fire, in some traditions, you don't use a lighter, or you don't even use matches. Different ways of working with this could be friction fires. There's something called a fire churn that's used in Eastern Europe all the way down into India. That's like a friction fire. There are sometimes people in some of the pagan traditions in Scandinavia use flint and a firestone. Or another way of working is to use wooden matches, because wooden matches are thought to have some of the energy of the plant still in them. So you can either light your sacred fire with wooden matches, which I try to use as much as possible, or you can light another implement like a candle or something like that with the wooden matches, and then use that to light your fire. The second idea in sacred fire is that sometimes the way the wood is arranged, if you're making a wood fire, matters, or the way the candles are arranged if you're working with more than one candle. So there's like a sacred geometry that can be used if you're using multiple candles. Sometimes they might make a triangle or a square or a cross. And when you're working with wood, sometimes the shape will be like of a cross, or like it will be layered up to represent the different worlds, or it will face in one direction, like towards the east, if the east is a sacred direction. But one of the most important parts of sacred fire is actually making offerings. The first offerings that you make should be to honor the fire itself. In the Andes, my teachers called this making the fire friendly, and it was just a way of asking the fire spirit to be with you, to be conscious, and a way of saying thank you. Because in all of these traditions, there's an idea of reciprocity that we have to give in order to receive, because that's the way the universe is constructed. The second idea is that the offerings that are made to the fire, and this can also be done with like a small votive candle, or even like a tea light like this, if you have it in a container, that the offerings can represent different things. Sometimes they can represent things that you want to, like intentions that you want the fire to create. Sometimes this can represent offerings to honor a specific spirit associated with the fire, in order to ask the fire to take these offerings instead of like a volcano erupting or a forest fire getting worse. So you're actually feeding the fire with offerings, the fire spirit, as a way of saying, take this instead. So it's a form of supplication. And Another way is to release. A lot of people know a releasing ceremony, which is like writing down something or writing a letter to somebody and then burning it in the fire. That's a releasing ceremony. And these can be quite complicated or very simple. But the basic idea is that fire is a way to make quick transformation. But the last way of working with fire is, I think, in a way the most interesting. And that is that fire is considered to be a doorway. Evelyn Riesdick says that watching a fire flicker, an outdoor fire or a fireplace fire, the rhythm of the flames flickering is very close to the rhythm of a shamanic drum beat. And that she has actually taught people to journey by watching the fire if they have hearing issues. Another way of working with the fire is that the fire's movements, whether it moves around in a circle or goes up and down or all these kinds of things, that these are actually messages from the fire, that it's communicating what it wants or what it predicts will happen in the future. But another way of working with the fire is to actually talk to the fire and then have the fire reply back. And this is done in some traditions. I try to work with this in almost every fire ceremony I've done. There's a quiet time when you just sort of meditate with the fire and allow the spirits to come through and talk to you. This is the idea that the fire is a doorway and allows like the helping spirits to come through and talk. So since we're in this summertime and things can heat up, there's a couple of ways you can work with fire. One is a fire ceremony that I'm going to be attaching to this video on my Substack. It's very simple. It's one that Alberto Violto teaches his students. And you can do this with a candle in your fireplace or outdoors in a fire pit. And you can do this alone or with other people. It's wonderful either way. And these can be done like on the new moon or the full moon. It's very traditional to do these at this time. But also, the fire can be gone to, if you work with a deity or a spirit that's connected to fire, you might try making offerings to it as a way of asking the fire out in the world to be sensitive to humans, that we're very fragile, and that our homes and all our trees and all these things are fragile, and that we hope that the fire beings will recognize this. And it's a form of elemental animism. So when you do this, you just find an offering that is acceptable to that fire spirit. You can even use colored candles if you have a tradition that works with candles. But just dedicate it during the summer. I try to do it frequently to one of these fire beings as a way of saying, I see you, I recognize you, please help us. And by help, I mean, the fire's going to do what it's going to do, but just please recognize that we're sharing this earth with fire. Another way to work with fire is to use the waning time of moon to do releasing fire ceremonies, and the waxing time of the moon to do fire for things that you want, like honoring ceremonies that you want. These are pretty vague and general ideas, and if you're in a tradition, you may have very specific times when it's appropriate to do a fire ceremony. But it's just important to know that as long as you work in a safe way, this is a good time of year to work with the spirit of fire and to at least let it talk to you a little bit in the form of leaving an offering, letting it burn so that the fire is friendly, and then just listening to what the fire has to say. I've received many helpful messages this way, and the power of working with this ancient, ancient, ancient ancestor is one that you will develop over time into like a real relationship, and it's very powerful. So thank you very much for being on this journey, and solstice blessings.